Hey folks, sorry this ran into a second video, but this is kind of hard to explain, so it just necessitates a little bit more. So if you turn to the Wordsworth poem on the second page of your handout, Intimations of Immortality, instead of putting in the accents, which I wish they had, they've done it with normal and bold type. So you have, there was a time when meadow, grove and stream, the earth and every common sight to me did seem. You can hear, and it's indicated with the type there, that this is iambic, this is weak strong. All right, what we call a rising meter. Weak strong, anything that starts out with a weak and proceeds to strong is called a rising meter. Anything that starts out with a strong beat and goes to a weaker beat, like a trochaic poem, is a falling meter. So this is a rising meter, or a naturally iambic, all the way through. And you can see here how they've broken it up into feet. And this is how you measure the exact meter of a poem. So look at line 1. There was a time when meadow, grove and stream. So you have 5 feet per that line. The second line, the earth and every common sight, 4 feet per that line. The next line, to me did seem, is just 2. Then you have apparelled apparelled in celestial light, that's 4. And the next one is 5, then 5, then 3, then 2, then 6. So there are things that we need to learn. A line with 1 foot would be a monometer. A line with 2 feet, like line 3 here, and the second to last line, is a dimeter. 3 feet per line is a trimeter. 4 feet per line is a tetrameter. 5 feet per line is a pentameter. 6 feet per line is a hexameter. 7 feet per line is a heptameter. And 8 feet per line is an octameter. The most common in poetry will be normally tetrameter or pentameter. Those are the two you run into a lot, because that's the English language naturally falls into those sort of patterns. But poets play with all of these meters. So this poem here is iambic mixed meter poem, because each line is a different length. With most metric poems, the lines will have the same number of feet, and then you can classify it. Let's look at the poem below, the very famous Tiger Tiger poem that you probably recited as a child. At least I did. Let's figure out, first of all, what the prevailing rhythm is. So just read it aloud. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. In the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye. So it's very, very repetitive rhythm. It's not weak strong. It's not like the one above it. It's the opposite, isn't it? Tiger, strong weak, strong weak, strong weak, strong. So we know now that it's trochaic. So let's break it up into feet. Tiger, 1 foot, draw a dash or a line there. Tiger, 2 foot, burning, 3 foot, bright, 4. So we got 4 feet per that first line. Let's see if that is consistent all the way through. In the forests, 2. Of the, 3. Night, 4. 4 again. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful simmer, try, tree, try. I rhyme. So consistently 4 feet per line all the way through. So what do we call this poem? What is the prevailing meter of this poem? It is a trochaic tetrameter. So if someone were to ask what is the rhythm of Tiger Tiger by William Blake, that's how you figure it out. First of all, you figure out whether it's trochaic or iambic, then you figure out the feet per line and assign the correct meter to it. Let's see if we can do a little bit more of that to make it clear. Let's look at page 738, another Wordsworth poem. 738. I wandered lonely as a cloud, another famous poem here. See if you can figure out what the prevailing meter is. Given most of the time that it's going to be iambic or trochaic. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beside the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Is that iambic or trochaic? What do you think? I wandered, break it down and read it slowly. I wandered lonely as a cloud, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong. So weak, strong is what? Iambic or trochaic? Yes, you're right. It's an iambic poem. So now let's figure out how many feet per line. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er hills and vale, when all at once I saw a crowd, and we can see all the way through it's 4 feet per line. So what is the rhythm of this poem? The meter of this poem? It is iambic tetrameter. Okay? Now this one I want you to do. See if you can figure out 1138. Let me see if it's something that's doable. A valediction, forbidden mourning, as virtuous men pass mildly away. See if you can figure that one out. Page 1138. Put it in the comments to this video. A valediction, forbidden mourning by John Donne, who you're familiar with. He did the flea poem. See if you can figure out what is the meter of this particular poem. Yeah. And put it in the comments to this video to indicate your presence and that you're listening. And if this is hard, maybe watch sections again. Go to the part of the book that explains meter, see if they do it better than I do. There are some poems that don't have a prevailing rhythm, usually free verse poems and things like that. So it's not common to all poetry. And there are some poems that have partial rhythm that breaks a lot. So they're not all as metric as these examples that I'm showing you here. So when you're asked to figure out a prevailing rhythm, if it loosely fits with iambic or trochaic, tetrameter, pentameter, hexameter, that kind of thing, that's fine. But a lot of times it won't, and you'll just have to put mixed meter poem or non-metrical poem as an answer to that particular question. I tell you this because it's going to come up in the final. I'm going to give you a poem and see if you can figure out the meter of the poem. And also, when you pick your poems for the poetry paper, I'm going to ask you to see if you can identify a rhythm, and your poem may have one and it may not. So I want to make that clear, that this is not something that happens in all poetry, just some. And then lastly, I'm going to send another document with this week's classes that groups all the poetry terms, useful terms to remember, in one place. And you might want to look at that, because when you pick a poem next week and we start talking about writing the second paper, this grouping of terms is going to be very useful to you. And you can see it's grouped by each of the elements of poetry. So the first group has to do with the language and rhyme, alliteration, assonance, end rhyme, and enjambment. The second one has to do with what we talked about today, which is rhythm, accent, blank verse, falling meter, foot, iamb, that kind of thing. Then we have all the language stuff: abstraction, apostrophe, connotative and denotative language, figurative language, hyperbole, imagery, that kind of stuff. And then the next group has to do with types of poems: ballads, dramatic poetry, elegy, that kind of thing. And then verse types, sonnets, villanelles, and so on. Obviously, when you pick a poem to do your second paper on, it's not going to contain all these elements. So you're only responsible for discussing what is actually in your poem. You might pick a poem that has lots of imagery. So your paragraph on imagery will be very full. You might pick a poem that has a prevailing meter or a rhyme scheme. So you're able to build a substantive paragraph about those elements. So this sheet or grouping of terms should help you. I want you to be able to identify what is in your poem based on all of these terms. So this is really to help you next week, but I thought to get it to you early so that you can start identifying these elements in whatever poem you pick. I will do a couple of videos next week. We'll do one where I talk about what's required and what I'm looking for in the paper, and I'll try to send that early in the week. And then the second one will be more of an exchange. Maybe we can share comments about what we wrote about, what we chose, and do sort of the same thing that we did in class but in YouTube comments. And I'll have more directions on that. So have a great weekend. Enjoy this rhyme and meter stuff. And I'll see you all in a few days. Take care. Stay safe.